Everyone dreams about living an uncommon life, but how we define that dream is very different for each of us. And for most, it's a lifelong pursuit. Welcome to the Uncommon Life Project podcast. We're going to introduce you to people who are living that life or enjoying the journey to get there. We're going to also give you some tools, tricks, and tips for starting or accelerating your own efforts to live an uncommon life, a life worth celebrating and savoring. Please welcome your hosts, Bryan Dewhurst and Phillip Ramsey.
Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of your favorite show, The Uncommon Life Project. I'm your host, Phillip Ramsey.
And I'm Bryan Dewhurst.
I'm all hyped up on Mountain Dew, Chip. Cannot wait for this show. It's a duo cast between Bryan Dewhurst and myself, Phillip Ramsey. We are going to talk about I would say a case study in a way, about two people that really helped galvanize how Bryan and I think about helping other people. And it really, when we heard this story, was like, wow, this really resonates with us and how we want to build our practice. So what is the story we're going to talk about today, Bryan?
It's going to get a little fast and furious in here. We're talking about the story, maybe the unknown story of the Fast and Furious franchise movie series, Paul Walker, and his financial advisor. So,
cannot wait to jump into this. If this is your first time listening to us, thank you for tuning in. We are advisors that like to put you in control of your plan and your finances by helping you unlock your passions. And what is it that makes you excited and tick? And we try to monetize those things. So we'll give you a customized plan to that financial freedom. Give us a call, schedule your 15-minute appointment. We would love to engage with you and hear what is uncommon in your life and some ideas that you have. And we'll also give you tips and tricks. This podcast is one that hopefully will inspire you and also help you understand how we think as advisors. So, Paul Walker, where do we begin? Where do we begin?
Yeah. So I want to say I love this story for so many reasons, but I think it's a really good microcosm of what we're trying to do as a firm and the message that we're trying to promote. And so I think it ties up in a bow very succinctly what we're trying to build here with Uncommon Wealth, and that this looks and feels different to everybody. And we just shot a podcast, and you were relating the story of like the guy you sat down with a couple for the first time, and he's like, "So you want me to buy a rental property?" And you're like, "Absolutely not."
Yeah.
And then as you peeled the onion back between he and his wife, it was actually his wife's gifting that they decided to actually press into and start a business with. And it was something that she had felt led in, and gifted in by Jesus, God, for over 20 years. And now she's starting to tap into that. And I think this dovetails on that and perfectly encapsulates what we're trying to say. And it's, Hollywood. So maybe It's a little more relatable.
And I think I need to caveat this. If you want to schedule your 15-minute call, our company's name is Uncommon Wealth Partners, and our website is uncommonwealth.com. That's where you can come in and schedule your 15-minute call. I don't know if I've ever actually said that. So huge whiff. And the fact that our podcast is the Uncommon Life Project probably isn't, in hindsight, hindsight's 2020. But
amen.
Here's where we're at. So please,
all right,
honestly, schedule it. But let's get into the story.
Okay.
And where do we start?
I want to caveat this. We don't know Paul Walker, and we did not know his advisor. So we're putting this together based off things that we've read and our own experience of doing this for people every day. So
story based on true events.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's, if you Google this, there's articles and stuff about it. It's, like we're not making this up. This is the real thing. But we weren't involved. So, and it happened a long time ago. So
I think that's a good.
I just want to caveat that, like,
that's
we're
good.
Speaking about it in general. So
right.
Really, Paul Walker was the lifeblood of this franchise, Fast and Furious, and partly because he enjoyed racing and fast cars personally. So offset, he raced cars. He raced a Porsche, I believe. I'm a fellow Porsche fan. So one similarity. I love Porsches, don't own one, but would love to at one point in the future. So he raced cars personally as a hobby outside of his acting career and did that for several years. The story goes that basically he did this for several years. Obviously, the franchise, The Fast and the Furious, was a hit, but that he was really spending millions of dollars racing as a hobby, and really kind of got connected to a financial advisor in California who was
Let's
successful.
talk about that, because I have a feeling he had a passion of racing his whole life. And then he got into acting. And then when his acting in the first Fast and Furious started becoming successful, I have a feeling that a lot of that money monetarily went into what? His passion.
Right.
And so it was a passion that was probably there for a lot longer before he was a successful actor. And so anyway, it's just kind of.
No, yeah. And I think that's what we all do, is we're taught to do something, go make money at it. And then that will give you a little bit of time freedom, but the financial resources to go do what you're passionate about on the side.
That's a great point.
And so we'll follow the story and we'll kind of show you why you need to turn that maybe on your head, because you don't have Hollywood revenue from movies like Paul Walker did.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, as he started to mature and as his hobby got more expensive and as he made more money, basically, however he got connected to this financial advisor, he got connected to him. And basically, the way I heard it was he was spending lots of money on racing and it wasn't sustainable. Like, if something happens to this Fast and Furious franchise or something happens to his cash flow, it could create a problem. I don't know what financial situation he was in. But anyway, so he gets connected to this advisor. And the advisor kind of restructures, he kind of just had a hodgepodge of stuff, as the article says, and basically helped him, structure kind of like a conservative portfolio and, liquidity and all this stuff. But the real main vein is what he really helped Paul understand was that, hey, you're spending a ton of money on this hobby and racing, and you're not deducting it and you're not creating a business around it. So it's always going to be an expense.
Mm-hmm.
What if you turned your racing passion into a business that made money? Well, now it's not going to financially drain you. It's going to be an additional asset that complements your overall movie franchise and your overall passion, so that you can do it from a business standpoint, probably largely deduct it, and have another asset beyond your movie assets.
Yeah. Paul Walker's advisor was doing Uncommon before Uncommon was cool,
Right. And so that's what they started doing. So they ended up actually owning the business together. They set up an extreme, I don't know if it was like extreme, but like basically like an extreme racing company, like car parts, aftermarket, soup, and like the show, like the movies. Mm-hmm. They basically worked on cars and souped them up to race them, like racetrack stuff. And the two of them were racing Porsches, and I think there's like a Porsche circuit that you can race in, kind of like a minor league racing type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they did, and they did that for several years together, and it became a real asset to Paul and his plan, and then obviously shored up kind of the financial drain that his hobby was, but then also really gave him something, that could have gone beyond his movie franchises, if that stalled out or whatever. So we all know the story, I think, is, tragically they crashed a Porsche and they both were killed. And it was a bad accident. I don't know the particulars of it all, but yeah, they lost their lives in that deal. And I think the reason that we wanted to highlight this is because this is what we're trying to get people to understand, is you want multiple sources of income, and you want to have multiple assets. And I don't know what Paul's royalties were, his contracts for those movies from when it started to, towards the end. I'm sure he was taking more of a cut. And if he was producing them and whatever, there's more upside financially to him as that went on. But he probably had some sort of royalty income off of that franchise. Mm-hmm. And now he has this, professional racing business that he owns with his partner, to help facilitate their passion of racing. And that in and of itself is what we're trying to show people is so powerful. And now their kind of story ended a little bit more tragically, obviously, but the principles of what they were doing are very important. And he had safe money and they invested and he had liquid assets and stocks, bonds, and all that stuff. Like we do that too. And that's part of a plan, and life insurance and all these different things is part of a plan. I'll stop there.
Let's talk about that. It's part of a plan. But for Paul Walker, that traditional stuff was not the exciting part of his plan. What was the most exciting part of Paul Walker's plan? I think it was the racing thing.
I do too.
That's what he was passionate about. And I think the acting almost complemented the racing thing, which was more of his passion. Maybe not. Like, we probably can't really say that, but like it could, right? And so this is what I would say. The cool thing about this is the mind shift that just happened with Paul Walker when that advisor came to him and said, hey, I see that you have a huge passion. Let's look at this a little different. Let's look at this like an asset instead of a complete drain on your finances.
Right.
But let's have you keep doing what you love to do, but let's just change a couple things and let's try to make a business out of it. Now, I love this because this is what we get to do every day.
Totally.
But I know how that is to be in the same room when you help people have this epiphany of like, wait a second, like that sounds really exciting to me. How do we do that now? Like now it's a problem.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So now it's a problem of like, okay, there is the goal. And we're working together to try to solve that goal. But that goal is something that really gets you excited. So the obstacles and the challenges that come are kind of like, well, yeah, I just need to overcome it. But I know my why. I'm super excited about it. And we're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And they ended up doing that. Now, what I like to talk about too is the complementing that it had for those experiences and passions. Like it wasn't like, hey, I want to go start a farm.
Right.
Like, I don't know farming. That wasn't it. And that's where you kind of briefly mentioned when I met with my pastor and his wife, and he said, so you want me to have a rental property? And I was like, well, probably not. But, like, I don't even know if that's your passion or gifts, but that's some people's passion and gifts, and it works really well. That's not everybody's passion and gifts. In fact, it could be a huge distraction if we try to put something that isn't part of your overall like experience and your giftings and what you get excited about. And so that person, go ahead.
Well, no, I think you're dead on. And I'm not trying to boot. I love the Fast and Furious franchise. I'm going to say that. But I want to make a point.
I know where you're going.
Could you name one other movie that Paul Walker was in?
No.
And I don't say that, I'm sure Samuel L. Jackson, he's done like the most movies of anybody. I'm sure he's got movies like, I wish I wouldn't have done that one. Like we all do, right?
Right.
So, but his best series was what he was most passionate about outside of the theater. And like, I don't think that's a coincidence.
Right.
And so I think that's like what you're trying to say. And then the last thing I'd say, because we did have, your pastor's wife on the show, the yoke is light when you're doing what you're gifted in. And like, you could see, and you read about Paul Walker, like he was very charismatic, very outgoing, very adventurous with the racing, like just larger than life. He was that guy full out his whole life because he was doing what he was passionate about.
Right.
And so I just wanted to share that.
There's so many principles in here, but man, this is what's happening now. Like I'll be playing Ultimate Frisbee and somebody's like, hey, listen, this has just really happened. I listened to your podcast and I was like, oh my goodness, like, thanks, man. Like, which one did you listen to? He's like, no, I listened to all your podcasts. And I was like, oh my goodness, like that's amazing. He's like, I can't wait to talk. I got a couple ideas. Like, oh, I can't wait to talk either. Like, how do we help encourage stuff like this? Because there's just not a lot of people out there doing that. And this is the best part. I was like, what number of this is or what idea? How many ideas have you had before you got to this one? He's like, 4. And I was like, what happened? He's like, your advice about running it past your wife. He's like, the other 3 never got past her. I can't wait to meet with that guy. But here's the principle I want to talk about. Sorry, I got sidetracked. Is when Paul Walker started thinking about putting his passion, making a business around his passion, the control went to who? It went back into Paul's court. Mm-hmm. And these I can only imagine, I don't know the actor world or being an actress or whatever. Like I have no idea about that whole industry. But what I imagine is if there's a lot of waiting, when's the next show going to get out? Is it going to be good? What's my contract? Like all good stuff that people have to manage. But when you have something that you can control and keep working on the sideline, it makes everything like just open up. So now he's not waiting by his door or his phone to get that call.
Totally.
He's working on something over here that he cannot wait to do. And when he does get that call, then it can help fund this other stuff. I would say like a lot of professional athletes would really benefit from uncommon wealth partners to be able to sit down with them and say like, I know that this is your passion now, but what else is your passion? And how about we start investing in some things like that? Because what I think is happening is they go meet with a traditional advisor. That traditional advisor puts them in like all this traditional stuff, which isn't very exciting. So then they just end up spending a whole bunch of money anyway.
Right.
Then they get done being a professional athlete and like, wait a second, like, did I amass enough wealth? What do I like to do? It's just like this, I don't know what's going on. So you're not a professional athlete. Most of the listeners that we have aren't professional athletes. So how does this work for you? I think a lot of people are working at a job that they don't love and they're not passionate about it. And they're trying to accumulate enough wealth to get to retirement and then do what they're passionate about. And we would say, have a mind shift, have a Paul Walker moment.
Have a Paul Walker moment.
Right. What is it that you are super excited about? And you almost think to yourself, it's so easy for me, no one would pay me. And then how do you start a plan to start going towards that passion? And even if it's the smallest, most conservative plan that you'd ever thought, and it really does go down to risk tolerance at that point. A risk tolerance of like, hey, I'm going to cut and quit my day job and go straight into this. That's a high risk tolerance. You also could have a very conservative risk tolerance and say, listen, I'm going to start blogging on the side or whatever,
right.
I'm making that up, or whatever it may be. And start stepping into something that you get excited about and seeing this passion and love this drum beat inside of you, the Jumanji drum beat inside of you. Like, how do you start hitting that drum harder? Because once you hit it once, you're getting in the game.
Yeah.
Just a matter of when.
Well, and whether you believe in God or not, when you go into the way you're gifted, you're gonna win. I mean, yeah, you might have some bumps and bruises, not saying that.
Right.
Some things will go wrong, for sure. It's happened to us, for sure. But in large part, God is going to meet you there. And even if you don't believe in God, there's going to be fruit there. You know what I'm saying?
I would say
when you step into that.
Definitely not prosperity gospel either, because you might win by completely falling on your face. But what's the difference between you putting your money into a stock and it goes to zero, or you putting your money on something that you're passionate about and it goes to zero? The difference is you're going to learn a ton more when you invest in yourself. And at the end of that, you're going to be able to have an experience that is going to help you in things in the future. Versus a stock, you didn't learn anything other than not to trust that advisor to put it in that stock or never do that again.
Yeah.
It's a way. So it's not a prosperity gospel thing. It's just we have seen people who have done time and time again, jumped off the cliff, and it has gone so wrong. And at the end of them, all of them say, I would never have done it different. Like, we have a friend and a client that jumped off, and it's in the middle, like started right before COVID, like
right before.
Couldn't be worse timing. And at the end of it, he was like, I never would have jumped if I knew what was coming down the pipe. But he's like, now that we're kind of in the middle of this thing, he's like, I am so grateful that I did it. Like, that gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
And it gives him purpose and direction.
You can't put a rate of return on regret.
Right.
You know, and it's like, you don't want to come to the end of your life and like, oh, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. You know, life is too short, and God wants us to be uncomfortable. Like, he wants us to use our gifting because it requires us to trust him more. Mm-hmm. You know, we aren't supposed to be comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so I just think this is like the topic. You know, there are ways to monetize what you are passionate and gifted in. And
point about,
we are here to help you if you need help with that. Right. If you are stuck, this is what we do.
Right. So to your point about you can't put a rate of return on regret, I remember Jane, who came to us, and long story short, she got this settlement because something happened. Long story short. And she came to us, and we started asking her questions. This is a long time ago. Like, I can't even tell you how long. It was a while. And at the end of it, we realized that she was really good at basketball. And this
playing collegiately.
Right. This accident kind of took her away from her goals and dreams, and she was on a path, to go get it.
And one thing I'd say, let me interrupt you. And then, basically she gets this settlement money was a temporary injury. And then, everyone's urging her to like, oh, you need to save and invest this and do it wisely. So keep going.
No, that's a great point. Thanks for saying that. So she comes to us saying like, I guess I got to invest it. And after talking to her, we realized that like she was on a path and this derailed her path. And so Bryan said, how much money monetarily do you think it would cost for you to go after this? She was like,
to become a professional women's basketball player.
Right. Thank you. And she's like, I don't know. So we did the math and it was not as much as her settlement was. And this is what Bryan said. And I thought it was great because she ended up going and trying it. She said, I'm not sure. And Bryan said, well, what's the cost of you not doing it? Like, let's say you're now 40 and you're sitting in your chair with 3 kids or whatever. Like, what's that cost to you? And she's like, not as much as it's going to cost for me to try it. And she did. She went after it. She went overseas and played Australia. And that ended up putting her on a path. I don't know where she works now. We haven't connected with her.
I think she's still at Gatorade.
Yeah. But like, it was so cool for her to like go and pursue that. And because of that, now she has a job that all those experience added up to her loving what she's doing. So what a cool thing to be a part of every day. We got to do this. Pinch me. Let's go.
Yeah. And I think there's a deeper meaning for me. It's just, I heard a statistic and you go through this COVID thing and it's really made me think about this more and more, and kind of Uber and all these new Airbnb. Like in early 1900s, it was like 80 or 90% of the population was self-employed, because you're expanding the country and people are opening up shops and businesses, all the different kinds of stuff.
Good point.
Now it's like less than 10% of people are self-employed or own a business.
Right.
And I think you're going to see that pendulum shift back. We had this industrialization, this institutionalization of everything, this corporatization of everything, kind of the centralization of everything, these big words, like these big companies and all this stuff. And now with like TikTok, Facebook, all this stuff, you can start a YouTube channel and have 5 million viewers that some movies in Hollywood don't even get 5 million views.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so, the internet has deinstitutionalized so many things, media, news, video for sure. And I think as you see with cryptocurrencies coming, it's going to deinstitutionalize finance, and it's going to take time. But I think we're seeing the pendulum shift back towards more and more people being self-employed. We're hearing a lot, in the FIRE community, financially independent, retire early movement, kind of like the side hustle language. And side hustles are great, but why don't you start a business? And I think that's why we keep coming back to this Paul Walker story, is like, he didn't need a side hustle. He was spending millions of dollars racing Porsches.
Mm-hmm.
He needed real money. He needed a business, and if you have a family, wife, 2 kids, 2 cars in the garage, you need money.
Yeah.
And business does that. And I think a lot more people, especially a lot more Christian people, are capable of that than they think they are. And it just, you don't go to school for that. You don't call mom and dad like, hey, I'm starting a business. They're like, what? What are you doing? You don't do that. You need benefits and all this stuff. And so I think this pendulum is swinging the other direction, and we want to be part of that pendulum swinging, right? And we want to walk with people.
I hope that that's true. I feel like this COVID thing has really shaken a lot of people. And here's what I hope I hope you're right. And that's what I'll just say is, I think there's a lot of people who felt they had a safe job. They had a safe job with a big company. And what they're finding is they don't. And now they're getting cut, and they had no reason why other than like, we don't need you anymore. We're downsizing or whatever.
Right.
It's not as safe as people think. And I would say, like, when I hear somebody losing their job, I just heard about this yesterday. One of our clients lost a job. We're right there. Let's work through this. But it was like, he had a very safe job. And we talked to him 2 weeks ago. He's like, yeah, no, everything's good. Nothing changing. 2 weeks later, done. And so what I was thinking right at that moment of like, I am so grateful that I control this thing, that I know if like, I'll have a job tomorrow, and like, I can confidently, as confidently as I can say that, I'm good. And so
you've been through that too in your pharmaceutical days. And
I have
the Obamacare cutting almost 400,000 people in the pharmaceutical world in about 2 years.
It was real. And so I realized that things might not be as safe as you play them out to be in your head. And so I hope you're right that people are starting to get this. Like, start your retirement, start a business. Like, let's go.
It was interesting. I think I talk about this a lot, but I'm on Twitter. I like Twitter the most of all the platforms. And this guy posted this tweet, and like, I just thought of this, but I think this is the future. He goes, my buddy just accepted 2 job offers because both are work from home. And he's like, the guy was like, well, neither of them will know that I took the other job because I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to go in. There's no physical presence. Wow. And, we utilize some contractors to help us with certain things, and they're literally all over the country. Like, we don't preclude them from working with other people, Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where this is headed is people are going to work for 2 people. They might work 20 hours for this company and work 20 hours for that company. And those companies don't care because they're getting the level of work they need for the 20 hours and that accountability,
Yeah, as long as you're upfront, I think that's good. If you're trying to be shady about it,
I'm not condoning the shady part of it, but I'm saying like a lot of people are working 2 jobs. My grandma worked 2 jobs for pretty much her whole life, and you're doing it like, well, I'm working full-time for this one and part-time for this one. And it's rigorous.
Mm-hmm.
And that effort could also be applied to what you're gifted at. And it's going to be hard and rigorous too, but at least you'll have a lot more control if something goes wrong.
Right.
And
this is what I love about this whole Paul Walker thing. His advisor didn't tell him not to do it. He said, do this in a different way. And like, this just might be my personality or how I'm built or my DNA. Like, I love when I can have a different mindset on something that I've always done in a common way. I love it. It like brings a whole nother perspective or a whole nother excitement level in me. And I say like, when you have kids, if you haven't had kids, like seeing life through their eyes is so exciting. We're going to the park for the first time, like watching your kid experience that. So there's a lot of things to get excited about. But when you have a different mindset about it, things start opening up because you realize like, wait a second, there's another way to look at this. And Paul Walker was challenged. So part of it is getting around people that will challenge you. Like, hey, why do you have that account over there when all you want to do is adopt a kid and you don't have enough money in your savings account to do it? You have a lot of money in your 401k, but it doesn't help you right now. So being careful about locking your money up into things that really take you away from starting something you're passionate about or putting a business around something you're passionate about.
And I think you always say, I think it's great, losing your job is probably one of the best things that can happen to you.
Can I get an amen?
And so for anybody listening in this COVID time, if you've lost a job or you're down or you're depressed or you're doing something you don't like or you're living in fear, this is the best time to double down on yourself and think differently. And if you need help thinking differently or looking at your situation with a different perspective, we'd love to help you with that because that's what we do. Mm-hmm. And you look at the great investors, Warren Buffett and some of these big guys, and they come in and buy really good companies in situations like this. You want to act like that, and you want to get your house in order to act like that. And it starts now. So I just like, it's not too late to invest in yourself. It's not too late to try something. This is the best time to do it. I'll leave it there. I agree.
Yep. And I think this is something at least to note is you don't have to be a salesperson when you're passionate.
Yeah.
It's just get excited about what you get excited about. Like, we're not asking you to do anything that you're not doing already. And like, we have had some amazing people pitch some amazing things that we are not passionate about. For example, heifers. Like, I'm sorry, what? Like moo? Yeah, heifers. And after you heard his passion, after we challenged him a couple times, we decided this is probably the best investment for you. Let's go after and do it. And like, his passion is what sold us to build a plan around something that he was passionate about. It sold us. And I'd say that he would say, he's like, I'm not a very good salesman. I'd say baloney on that deal. Sold me. And at the end, I was like, can I invest in heifers? Can you just do what you're going to do? So
heifer mutual fund.
Yes. So anyway, that's our story about Paul Walker. And man, it gives me goosebumps to think that there could be people out there listening and their brain is just turning of like, okay, what is it that I like, would love to do? And when you figure out what that is, my question to everybody is, when do you want to retire from that? And the answer is like, what? I would never want to retire from that. Now we've got something that we want to go on this uncommon path with. So that's why you listen to the show, right?
Yeah, and I think the last thing I want to say that is just encapsulate what you just said is we started with Paul Walker, we'll end with Paul Walker.
Yeah.
His whole life that we're talking about, his movies franchise, his business, and then actually getting in the seat and driving was racing. And like you see that exuded in multiple different fronts and peeling back the onion of that passion. You know, it'd been very easy for Paul Walker to be like, oh, I'm going to go buy 20 Papa John's and I'm just going to get pizza.
Good point.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. Peyton Manning actually did that. He talks about that. He bought 20 Papa John's in and around Denver right before they legalized marijuana. And he kids about it. It was a great investment. But he also has a school that he teaches other quarterbacks. He and his brothers and his dad run a quarterback camp. It is actually like their, passionate, focused business. Peeling back the onion of that passion and expertise, you can monetize it multiple different ways and share it with the world in multiple different ways. And that is what we're trying to talk about and help people with. And so I think Paul Walker in this story is a great example of using that passion in racing multiple different ways and staying in that kind of center sweet spot that he was created to be in.
Totally. And I'm going to just say it, not to be morbid, but like, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. Like this was not part of Paul Walker's plan, obviously.
Right.
But the fact is, like, we've got something, like, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. So how are you living today? And to me, that's where I get excited because it puts everything in perspective quickly. What's important to you? How are you going to live today the best you can? So you've been listening to the Uncommon Life Project. I've been your host, Phillip Ramsey.
And I am Bryan Dewhurst. Thank you for listening.
Loved it. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you later.
It'll be uncommon.
Love it. Bye.
That's all for this episode of the Uncommon Life Project, brought to you by Uncommon Wealth Partners. Be sure to visit uncommonwealth.com to learn more about our services. Don't miss an episode as we introduce you to inspiring people who are actively pursuing an uncommon life.